This program is made possible through federal funds provided by the Institute of Museum and Library Services as administered by the Massachusetts Board of Library Commissioners. My name is Vicki Turcotte. I'm the Assistant Director for Support Services here at the library, and welcome to tonight's presentation on sexuality and aging. I'll have what they're having with Dr. Jane Fleishman. Dr. Fleishman is a writer, an award-winning educator, sexuality researcher, and an AASECT certified sexuality educator. She earned her master's in education and doctor of philosophy at Widener University Center for Human Sexuality Studies. Her curious nature led to her latest accomplishment, the book, The Stonewall Generation, LGBTQ Elders on Sex, Activism, and Aging. She co-hosts a regular podcast on sex in the second half of life and recently completed a popular TEDx talk, Is It Okay for Grandma to Have Sex? She is a proud mother of two really fabulous 20-somethings and lives in Northampton, Mass. You can reach her at www.janefleischman.com. And please welcome Dr. Jane Fleishman.
Thank you, Vicki. Hi, everyone.
Right.
Welcome to Chelmsford Public Library. I haven't been here yet, but actually haven't been here before, but haven't been here yet. But I just want to say a big thank you to you, Vicki Turcotte, and the whole library, and also to the Mass Board of Library Commissioners for funding this program. I think it's really fantastic. You know, as Vicki said, I do a lot of work. I'm a researcher, a writer. I do a podcast called Our Better Half. Get it? And it's about sex and aging, sex in the latter part of life. We call it the better part of life. And I do a lot of presentations. And tonight is the first time I've done a presentation so close to home. And I wish I could be with you. I live in Northampton, Mass, so not too far away. So let me tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing tonight, and a little bit about how I got started in this field. As Vicki said, I'm now a PhD in human sexuality, and I earned my PhD in 2016, just the same year that Jesse retired from UMass Lowell. And I had retired just before that, about 5 years earlier, from a really wonderful and I think really meaningful career in state service in the Department of Mental Health and Addiction Services in Connecticut. My last job was the director of staff development and medical education at a large psychiatric hospital. And I loved my job. I had great time. You know, we had really cool people on staff. We had really interesting patients. We had about 500 patients, you know, old story, like Northampton State Hospital, or, you know, one of the very large institutions. And we had 1,000 people on staff, and I had a really nice team that worked with me. And when I retired, it was really hard because I came home and nobody listened to me. You know, my kids were in high school, and I'd say things like, "Hey, can you help me do something?" They'd look at me like, "What are you talking about? We're doing our homework, or we're playing games." So I realized that I wasn't really ready to retire, although we got an opportunity to retire a couple years early. We got a nice package, but I decided to go back to school, and I'd always wanted to study human sexuality because it was an area that I felt good about talking about, and it's an area that lots of people don't feel comfortable talking about. So I knew I had some affinity toward it, but I didn't know that much. So I embarked on this crazy idea of getting a PhD, and in 2016, at the age of 62, I got my PhD, and boy, was I happy and proud. And really, it was hard. I mean, childbirth was hard, but this was also really hard. And I was searching around while I was in school. I got my master's in education on the way to the PhD, and I was searching around for a topic for my dissertation and for my research. And while a lot of my fellow students were interested in young adults or kids or parents, I was really interested in older adults. And, you know, not just because I'm older myself, but because there's so little research on older adults. And there are so many taboos about talking about sexuality with older adults that I thought, oh, taboo. I love that. Perfect. This is good for me. So I did some research on older adults in same-sex relationships, ages 60 to 75. I looked at the predictors and correlates of sexual satisfaction. And part of the reason I did that is because I didn't want to just look at problems. I wanted to look at something that'd be really positive because I'm a kind of a sex positive educator. And I got some very interesting results. But when I finished my quantitative research, I just was not done. I really wanted to do more research on this population. And so then I did another crazy thing. I embarked on this book that Vicki was telling about. This is my book, and I have to hold up the picture and just to show you, there's my name on the bottom. I mean, really, like, this is amazing to me. This is a one and only opportunity. I don't think there's going to be people say, what's your next book? Like, are you kidding me? You know how hard it is to write a book. So it took me 4 more years to write this book, and it just came out last June from Skinner House Press. And Vicki's got it listed on this lovely resource sheet that she put together. So I want to thank you for doing that, along with some other really wonderful books about sexuality and aging. And I was longing for stories. So I went around the country and I interviewed 10 different LGBTQ elders. So people who identified as lesbian, bi, gay, trans, or non binary or queer. And what was great about it was, first of all, I met very interesting people, but I also got to really hear stories from people from whom you never get to hear anything. And many of them were activists, as I am. And as a sex researcher, I asked them about sex, I asked them about activism, and I also asked them about aging. And I realized that their take on aging was quite different than what the mainstream media would have you think about it. And so that led me to all sorts of really interesting lines of inquiry about how I might impart some of the stories and the lessons I learned from those folks. So I'm not going to talk specifically about those people tonight, although, Vicki, you know, we could do another program sometime. I'm just saying, if you ever get another grant, but, or you don't even have to get a grant, but I could do a sort of an interesting um, talk about the stories in the book and some of the people that I met because they're wild and they're amazing. But the great thing about a library is you don't have to buy this book. You can see it right there on the shelves. You can, it might be in their uh, mobile book cart, but um, as a young person, I remember that the library really saved my life. And it was a place that I was allowed to go. It was safe. My mom knew it was a good place, unlike the pizza parlor where, you know, bad things happened in the back of the pizza parlor. But um, the library was a great place for me. And when COVID is over, I really, you know, I've been missing my public library. It's the Forbes Library in Northampton, and it's a great place. And I know that you all will be happy to, you know, have programs there again and not have to do it this way. So, um, so that's just a little bit about me. And today, just today, a really interesting article got published, which is not on my reference list for the slides tonight. But you know, in addition to all this work that I've been doing, I also give a lot of presentations, and I always include other people's research, which I'm going to do tonight. But I want to make sure I get her name right. Emily Jamea, who's a clinician, a sex therapist, wrote a really interesting article that was published today in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy about long-term relationships, older adults, and desire. And she talks about this term flow, Flow. So I hadn't heard this in relation to sex and sexuality, but what she talks about is, so cast back in your mind, remember the Beach Boys and Surf City and Surfing USA and all that. Surfers talk about being one with the wave. Now, I've never been able to catch a wave very well, but I know that if a surfer says that, it's like there's a flow. And this researcher put that terminology on sexuality and relationships. And what she found was that when couples, long-term couples, come into her office in her clinical experience with an issue of desire. She talks to them about flow and how when they can really become more present and together, there can be more of a kind of satisfaction. And she related flow to sexual satisfaction, which was exciting to me because that's one of the variables that I studied. So I'm not going to report much more about her study, but if you're interested in the chat, you can send me a little email or send me a chat and put your email address in there and I'll be happy to send it to you. Okay, so enough about me. What do you think about my sweater? That was a line from many years ago in a bad movie. So I'm going to share my screen and I have some slides that I'd like to show you. And hang on a second. Everything's moving very slowly here. It's not responding. Hang on a moment. I'm gonna close that out and try it one more time.
And we practiced this before the program too, and it worked
I
just
know.
fine.
That's probably why,
Yeah.
I should have opened it once. Okay, let's see, close this. And let's try one more time. Great, we got it. Vicki, is that working?
Yes, it is.
Excellent, great. Thank you so much. So tonight is a takeoff on that wonderful line from When Harry Met Sally, when Rob Reiner's mother actually was in that scene and she said, I'll have what she's having. And I just changed it to what they're having to make it open for all of us. Tonight, what I'm going to do with you is give you an opportunity to, I think it's a unique opportunity to apply some of this current sexuality research and resources to your work with older adults or to yourselves, and to give you some of the knowledge, skills, and attitudes about older adult sexuality. If at any point tonight you have a question or it doesn't make sense, or you just think what I'm saying is a bunch of I don't know what, feel free to put it right into the chat. And hopefully, I can't see it, but Vicki, if you can just ask me to pause, I'm happy to be interrupted.
Absolutely.
Thanks. So I need to just tell you that this TED Talk I did has really it was a lot of fun to do, really hard, tough to memorize. But I just want to read you a very short excerpt from it. Why are we so afraid to even consider that there may be a new way to think about their and our own sexual journeys? If we allow ourselves to see our elders as fully human, ultimately we will be making room for ourselves and our own futures as sexual beings. Though it's true old people move more slowly, are often in need of assistance, and rarely generate income, they just may have some keys to happiness. And it's quite possible that one of them is about love, intimacy, and sex. You know the old saying that youth is wasted on the young. Well, among the benefits to being old are precisely the ingredients that make someone ready for a deep and intimate sexual life. Older age frequently comes with an openness, authenticity, and a deep appreciation for connection. What will it take to see people as fully human, no matter what state their body or mind is in? And tonight we're going to be talking about all of that. I'm going to hopefully describe for you the meaning of the biopsychosocial aspects of sexuality, some of the challenges. And then the most important thing about tonight is I'm going to ask you to apply one aspect of this training to your own lives. Either if you're working with older adults or if you yourself feel like, okay, I can take some of this these tips for myself. And by the way, sometimes people feel nervous, like thinking of themselves as an elder or older, but take it on. It's good. You've earned it. We don't revere older adults enough in our society, so please take it on. So maybe you came here with some questions. Maybe you've got some concerns. maybe there's some topics you'd like some help on, feel free to put those in the chat as well. And there's no wrong answers, and there certainly are no wrong questions. So we're going to talk a little bit about current research, biopsychosocial concerns, benefits, and then developing sort of a better environment, and then some best practices. I'm going to begin with some of these really kind of critical terms for us to all be acquainted with. I wouldn't be a good academic if I didn't start off with grounding us on a glossary, but sex is generally something people think of as an act between two or maybe more people involving their genitalia, and it also involves their gender, either assigned at birth or their gender that they um, have chosen. Sexuality is a much bigger concern. It's sort of the umbrella over which sex fits, and the Circles of Sexuality model is a wonderful model developed by a really interesting guy, Professor Emeritus at University of Kansas, Dennis Daly, who talked about intimacy and sensuality and sexual health and identity. He talked about relationships, something called skin hunger. And he also talked about the non consensual side of sexuality around rape and trauma and incest. And he also, of course, talked about sexual expression. Now, PIV, or penis and vagina intercourse, is a type of sexual expression. And when many people hear me talk about sex, they think, oh, okay, I'm talking about penises and vaginas. Well, yes, and there are many other sexual expressions. Other sexual expressions could include kissing or heavy makeout sessions or oral or anal or nipple play. There are so many other forms of sexual expressions that I like to remind people that PIV is only one very specific but not encompassing area of sex in terms of the sexual behavior. For a lot of older adults, because intercourse, either because of difficulties with erections or vaginal dryness, which we'll talk about in a bit, can become difficult, we've coined a term about, I don't know, 40 years ago called outer course. It's not a real word, but the term conveys any type of sexual pleasure that can be conveyed without penetration. So again, use your imagination. Alternative sexual identities occur at all ages. And I'm talking about kink or BDSM. BDSM is probably well known to many of us because uh, either we've thought about it, read about it, or heard about it, or maybe explored it. The 50 Shades of Grey was a good example of a very popular novel that expressed BDSM and kinky behaviors. Also, the leather community is considered part of the alternative sexual identities. ISBs are inappropriate sexual behaviors, and those excuse me, occur when there is non-consensual sex. So all of the areas from here down to here are all what are considered consensual behaviors. Inappropriate sexual behaviors could be any type of sexual harassment, or perhaps when someone touches someone inappropriately when they're in a senior living community or in a public building, or expresses a sexual uh, demand on someone else without getting consent. Those are ISB, or inappropriate sexual behaviors. And the last one I want to talk about tonight, because it's really important, is IPV, or intimate partner violence. It's what we used to think of as battered women's issues or domestic violence. Um, but it's not just something that happens to women, it can happen to people of any gender. And it does occur amongst people who are older and also people who may have cognitive impairment. So there are very, very many more possible terms that we could go over tonight, but I'm going to stop there. So I wanted to give you a little journey into the hearts and minds of older adults who are talking about sex. This is a quick 5-minute video by Liz Blazer, who is a student in animation and digital arts at USC, University of Southern California. And afterwards, I'm going to ask you to just type in the chat any thoughts or comments you have about what the people in the video have said. What she did was she took her interviews with older adults and then transformed them into an animation that was really pretty spectacular. So hang on a moment and we will get right there. Anything in the chat that I should know about while I'm doing this, Vicki?
No questions yet, but
Okay, good.
Jesse shared your TEDx talk.
Jesse,
A
you are
link to that.
great.
He is. He's gonna take my job soon.
Jesse, I want you to come to all of my sessions. Okay, let's see if I can get this
I'm
going.
just a very fast Google searcher.
Good. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. Vicki, let me know if this is working okay.
The most romantic thing is the moment when I ask her, do you want to go to bed with me?
The first time I said no.
So a few days later, I asked her again, and she agreed. This was the most romantic, wasn't it? The most romantic thing. My name is David Bielobroda.
My name is Ruth Cooper, and my age is 79.
I was born in 1980.
My age is 92.
My name is Sunga Greisman Rubin, and I'm 84, going on 85.
How old am I?
Well, I truly believe you stay young because of sex.
At 18, we just wanted a sex object. At 75, you may still want sex. You're not sure you're going to get it, but you're looking for comfort.
I've always wanted romance in my life. Really love, and I think you need it all your life. You need it all your life. You need to be touched, you need to be felt, you need to be hugged, you need to be kissed.
Companionship is very important.
So we cover it up with, well, I don't need men in my life, and I'm past my desires. Baloney. I don't think you ever get past your sexual desires.
I adore it, and I'm not ashamed of it.
Yeah, he doesn't look it. He's a very sensual man.
Very.
Listen, I've had so many boyfriends, I can't even count them on my fingers and toes.
Most of the men my age or better are either dead, looking for a nurse or a purse, or sick.
I'm short, reserved, self-conscious, eager to please. I'm compassionate, a good listener.
I used to always look for a good-looking man and good dancers. That's what counted. And dress well. Oh, God forbid they shouldn't dress well.
She would be a non-smoker.
Yes, pretty, beautiful also.
He has to have his shit together.
Kindness, consideration.
Sparkle in their eyes.
That tips well.
And no Republicans, please.
But there is something about a senior citizen community that you realize that you are mortal, You see too many people around you, and you know that someday you're going to say bye-bye too.
Unfortunately, I've outlived just about every one of my friends.
At this age, there isn't much time for independence. You think there's just a few years left, and you want to do as much as possible togetherness.
When my husband died, he was 52. I took off my wedding ring, and I said to myself, I wonder what's around the corner for me. And I think instead of sitting and saying, oh, he died, I always looked forward.
The person in my age who has the capacity of doing sex This is the highest thing in the world, the greatest achievement in the world. And the pleasure is unbelievable.
This business of saying a man uses a woman for a one-nighter, what about a woman using a man? Is that terrible? Kushmir and Tuchasarai. You know what that means? I hate to tell you. Kiss my you-know-what. It is, when you say it in English, it sounds bad, right? But in Jewish, it's kind of cute. And someone says something to you, you say, yeah, Kushmir and Tuchasarai, kind of cute, you know.
So, any thoughts or comments, or it wasn't the most widely distributed demographic, right? It was very narrow in terms of people only in Southern California. And hang on a sec. That's not good. There we go. Sorry about that. And I think in many respects it was not as wide diversity as we would have liked, but it was a slice of older adults. So if you could put one word in the chat of what it brought up for you, what would be one word that you would say? Any ideas?
They're thinking about it.
Yeah, think about it. I show that to a lot of younger audiences too, to explain to them what they really don't even realize. Okay, well, if you think of any, feel free to let me know.
Someone put that laughing is good for just about everything.
Thank you. I agree. I totally agree. So it's called Backseat Bingo, and if you are interested, I can send you the link for that as well. And now what I'd like to do is get into the heart of the matter and give you some of the research on sexuality and aging. By the way, there isn't a whole lot. So I'm going to give you the best of what's there. But if you know any young and budding doctoral students, please tell them to do research in this area because we need more of it. Let me begin with the Harvard study of adult development. You've probably heard about it. It's one of the longest going longitudinal studies in our country, and they have amassed years and years, decades of data. And they've been trying to find out what's important to people in their adult development, and particularly in this area, what's important to happiness. And one of the most important keys to happiness that they've found amid all of the data that they have amassed is not based on income or where you live or whether your parents forced you to go to religious school. It's the key to happiness is relationships. Now, they're not talking about sexual relationships, but they were talking about relationships. In fact, they said that people who were most able to have satisfying friendships in their 50s had the most satisfying relationships in their 80s. So keep that in mind, those of you who are somewhere within that range.
Just to
Now
share another comment, Jane.
Yeah,
Excuse
sure.
me. If you
Please.
didn't see their age, many of the comments could be from any age group. The need for connection, to be touched, etc.
Totally. You're so right. We're seeing that with the young people who are stuck at home on Zoom all day instead of going to school, and they're so dying for connection. So whoever said that, you are so brilliant. Absolutely right. I want to turn now to our sexuality research and our sexual function. John Delamata, whose book actually is on your list, Vicki, who's one of my favorite sexuality researchers, just passed away about 3 years ago, said that what he looked at was sexual function in older adults. You see, we're always worried that it's chronic pain or chronic disease or hormonal shifts that are going to really sink our sexual lives. But what he found was that there were 3 factors, and the 3 factors are so interesting. One is basically having good physical and mental health. Second is making sure that you have a partner nearby. Interesting, right? Makes sense. Although I do believe in solo sex or masturbation, but he's talking about relationships. And the third one, which is so important, was a positive attitude about sex. So thank you for coming to this talk tonight, because clearly you're in that range. Maggie Syme, who just left her teaching position at Kansas State and is actually in Boston now, wrote a very interesting article a couple of years ago where she interviewed women ages 45 to 60. And she said that what she found for these midlife women was that they often started this phrase when she asked them about sex, well, at my age, ... In fact, that's the title. That's the beginning of the title of her research article. The assumption is at my age, I have better things to do. I can't think about sex anymore. When in fact, they were adopting the same sexual dysfunction model that John Delamata and his colleagues debunked back in 2007. And what she says in her article is so interesting, that we need to replace this dysfunction model with a sexual wellness model, so that we can really think about our lives from early years, in our early sexual years, all the way to our latter years. Lee and colleagues found that regular sexual expression occurs all the way through the lifespan. In fact, Delamata and his colleagues found that sexuality and sexual expression, regular sexual expression, occurred in people's 50s, 60s, and 70s. And I have to say, in my anecdotal research from people coming up to me at the end of talks, I don't have this opportunity anymore because it's all on Zoom. But when I'm in person with people always come up to the end of a workshop and they have the most interesting questions that they don't want to ask in front of everyone. But they'll often point to somebody in the audience that they know, and they'll say, see her. And this happened to me recently, about a year and a half ago in Boston. And they said, see that woman over there? She's 92 and she's got 2 boyfriends. So this is all anecdotal research, but Lee and colleagues said that regular sexual expression occurs later in life, and Delamata and his colleagues reiterated that. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about Beverly Whipple. Now, you might not know her, but she's a very cool person. She taught at Rutgers for many years. She's a nurse researcher and one of the leading researchers on women's sexual expression, and has been part of ASECT, the American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists, which is our national organization, for many years. And Beverly and a few colleagues got together and they tried to determine, they did a meta-analysis of all the sexuality research around physiology. And they tried to determine what were some of the health benefits of what they called regular sexual expression. One of them was a reduction in the risk of heart disease or complications of heart disease. Another one was the reduction of risk of 2 of the major forms of cancer, prostate and breast cancer. Another finding was that orgasms or sexual expression that results in an orgasm can actually alleviate chronic pain due to the expression of certain hormones or neurochemicals like oxytocin. People think of oxytocin as sort of the cuddle hormone, and other endorphins that are expressed after sexual expression. And finally, one of the most important health benefits of sexual expression is that it improves your quality of life, your physical and overall mental health. Now, some people have really been very impressed with those health benefits. And if you're interested in that particular article, please let me know and I'd be happy to send it to you. So the question often is, why do older adults have sex? Well, I mean, partly to have fun and it's enjoyable, but if there's no reproductive capacity, and many older adults have some form of an illness or chronic pain, why would older adults have sex? Well, Gewirtz, Maidan, and Ailon a couple of years ago did a really interesting analysis of older adults, and they, through a qualitative analysis, they did interviews with older adults, and they found that the three most important areas were not release or performance or uh, uh, sense of self-worth. It was love, it was commitment, and it was companionship. So interesting, right? And the University of Michigan teamed up with the ARP in that same year, and they found that 75% of older adults reported sexual satisfaction. Amazing. Now, most of the studies that I've looked at so far tonight have been with older adults in mixed sex or heterosexual relationships. In my own research, as I was explaining briefly in my introduction, I looked at factors for sexual satisfaction among older adults in same-sex relationships or in what we're calling sexual minorities. And I published an article with two wonderful researchers who also happened to be on my dissertation committee and really were so helpful to me in every way. And we published an article based on the results of my research in 2019. And we found that what was so interesting to me and what was, again, whenever you're doing, I don't know if any of you tonight in this call are researchers, but you know that you often start off with a hypothesis and some assumptions. And generally the assumptions are, absolutely not going to bear fruit. And so in this case, same thing happened. I thought that this age group of people 60 to 75 years old who were really part of that generation that I call the Stonewall generation, who came out in the 60s and 70s and may have been in the closet for many years, maybe before that and maybe after that, would have a lot of internalized homophobia or belief in what the world spewed out about LGBTQ people. And in fact, I found just the opposite. Their internalized homophobia was very low. They had very high resilience, probably because they were older, and many of us as we age do experience more tribulations of life and develop more resilience. And they had very high relationship satisfaction, which was the one predictor of sexual satisfaction. So that was very interesting. All three of these variables were correlated. And again, I'd be happy to send you an article from the Journal of Homosexuality where it was printed, a really wonderful journal. So there are sexual challenges. I don't mean to say tonight that all of older adult sexuality is easy for us because, as I alluded to earlier, there may be some difficulties, and some sexual challenges have to do with desire. And this is from a recent study around people in their 60s and 70s that low desire, difficulties with vaginal lubrication, and inability to climax were, moderate to fairly high. And the last one was one that we hear about so often, which is either difficulties for men who have penises which don't get erect as quickly. They take longer, they don't stay erect as long, or they're in a different direction, and that may be problematic as well. That's from Lindau and her colleagues, and she's a very well-respected sexuality researcher as well. There are some special concerns I just wanted to point out tonight. Right now, we're living in this unbelievable time of COVID-19, which has hit older adults so much more painfully than any other age group. And it has also hit older adults who are marginalized. So any older adult who's also a person of color and any older adult who's also a gender or sexual minority has been hit even harder. We know that there are disproportionate health outcomes, and that may be part of the reason. And also we have racial, ethnic, and cultural communities right now. We're in a conversation nationally about race. Just a few days ago, we had that terrible shooting in Atlanta um, where Asian American women were murdered in massage parlors in Atlanta. What was really painful about that one was that the shooter used the term sex addiction as if to say he had no control over his actions. We also are looking at people with alternative sexual identities, maybe people who uh, um, have chosen to live their lives in an authentic way as a trans person. And we know that not just young people are living authentic lives, but older adults as well. And we know that there are gender and sexual minorities and the concerns about all of those folks. So I want to say, particularly, I want to go back to one on here around alternative sexual identities. When people move into senior living communities, I don't know if any of you live in a senior living community for people over ages, maybe 55. Maybe someone had an identity, they were a swinger, or they were interested in kink, or they had another alternative sexual identity that made sense for them when they were living in their own home. Now they're living in congregate living, or they're living in a very small community. And I like to bring up Peyton Place because I remember it from when I was a kid. But there's often a very difficult time being oneself if you're out of the norm in a community like that. So some of these can be special concerns that I wanted to highlight tonight. And then I wanted to just say that we've got this dialectic going on, okay? The dialectic is, on one hand, we've got this accumulated sadness and loss. We can't get it up. We can't get it up long enough. We can't feel. We can't be penetrated. We've lost limbs. We've lost body parts. I have a friend, colleague, Dr. Sabita Pillai Friedman, who talks about women who have had mastectomies and they've lost one of their major sexual parts. And how do they then rewrite their sexual script or the way in which they become aroused if they've lost their breasts? So you can see there's so much loss. And on the other hand, right, there's two sides of this. There's this possibility of emergent pleasure. The kids are out of the house. Well, maybe they were out of the house, and then when COVID hit, they came back, but hopefully you've gotten rid of them again. But there's a possibility that you've got the place to yourselves finally after 20 years, and you can really begin to explore each other in a way that you never had the opportunity before when you were working and you were raising the kids, or you were working and doing other things. So there's this dialectic, and I wanted to tell you about a series called Disrupt Aging. Has anybody heard of this? Vicki, have you heard of this? It's something the ARP is doing, and they put out this great video about how millennials look at old people. So bear with me, it's about a 4-minute video. Let me see if I can pull it up. And Vicki, I'm gonna need your help one more time just to make sure that it works, okay? So here we go, fingers crossed. Everybody's still here? Everybody's still awake? You okay?
Yeah.
Okay, good, great. Good, thank you. All right, let's see, millennials. Great.
Yeah, we can see it.
Good. You can stand right there. That's your mark. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great.
Awesome.
Just tell us your first name and your age.
My real age?
My name is Paolo. I'm 25 years old.
My name is Daniela, and I'm 19.
24. 35.
31. 33.
I'm 26 years old.
What age do you consider to be old?
Late 40s.
Maybe 50.
I feel like 30 is a new 20, so I'd say like 40 is old.
I'd probably say 50s.
I'd like you to show me how an old person would cross the street. Show me how an old person would send a text message. How might an old person do a push-up? What about jumping jacks? Okay, hang on. There's someone I want you to meet.
Hello, I'm Birch. I'm 66.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and I'm 68.
I'm Dee, and I'm 55.
George Fastbinder, 75.
Wow. My name is Parvati. I'm 70.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're gonna give you about 2 minutes to teach each other something that you are good at.
I can teach you a jump that I do.
Okay, please.
Both of your legs go up, and your arm goes up, and your left arm goes like to the side. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Lift 1, 2, 3. And bring it to your heart. And bring it to your heart. Add the head in. Yeah.
You want to try to get your balance and raise up. Now, you can bring your legs and your feet up. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So when you come out of a turn, either way, you go back to that basic.
Over. Now forward. Over. Yeah.
Square it like this, and give me a hook. Hook. Jab, cross, hook, and then we'll go like this, all right?
1, 2, 3.
Now, what age might you consider to be old?
Probably 80 or 90. He could just do everything that I told him to do.
An age that I would consider to be old now might be 100.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I said in the 50s, I thought that would be old. But when I thought about it, like...
Wait a minute. I can do it. It really changed my thinking of what old is.
You've taught me something today. Clearly, there's no way she's old, you know?
Now I know from today, hey, I don't look at age.
At my age, I feel like I did when I was in my 20s.
There's so many things that I still want to do. There's so many things that I can do. As long as I'm growing and learning, then age doesn't matter.
When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Daphne. It was great meeting you.
How long have you been doing this? Is this a new skill?
40 years.
Wow.
So I love that guy's quote at the end. When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old. He also had a great accent, didn't he?
We had a comment of oy vey.
Oy vey, that's right. Any other thoughts about this? Did it make sense to you? Has anybody ever experienced this, that a young person thinks you're so old, and they think like 40 is really old? So yeah, let us know. A couple weeks ago, I was swimming and finished my laps at the same time that the guy in the next lane finished his. We both stayed in the pool catching our breath. He said, "Getting old sucks." I replied, "You got that right." He continued, "I just turned 40. I really feel it." You told him that you were 72. Good for you, Jesse. That's great. Great. Well, let's continue. This is really great. And I just wanted to do a time check with you, Vicki. It's about 5 of 8. And I've got maybe about 15 minutes more. Is that okay?
We have till about 8:30.
Okay. Is that all right with you folks? Great. And if you got questions, just interrupt me. I'm totally available. I'm not going anywhere. I have nothing else going on right now. So I'm here, I'm available. I'm in the flow with all of you. So, okay, let's go back and, okay, great. So I'd like to turn our attention to biopsychosocial concerns. So there's medical concerns like chronic illness, chronic pain, and also drug interactions, right? While you're on medication for diabetes, or if you're doing cancer treatment, or you have high blood pressure, all of those kinds of drugs can affect your sexual life, including drugs for anxiety and stress, like SSRIs or SNRIs. And there are physiologic changes like vaginal dryness. And one of the reasons that women or people with vaginas have vaginal dryness is because we have a lack of estrogen. And so we don't have as much natural lubrication, and that creates often a thinning of the vaginal walls, and it makes penetration more painful. And by the way, we can remedy that very easily now because we have some great lubes on the market. Don't use KY jelly if you can help it. There's so many other better lubes without any impurities, and we can talk about those later if you're interested. If you've had a prolapse uterus or a prolapse rectum or any other part of your genital area that has basically dropped, you need to remember that prolapse happens often, and we need to really be thoughtful about the fact that it shall not be the reason why we no longer can be sexual. It just means that we have to be thinking about it in a different way. And there are some good remedies out there. Um, uh, er, People call erection issues erectile dysfunction. I don't like the word dysfunction. Again, as I said earlier, it really negates wellness. And I just read this wonderful book about sort of the intersection of disability theory, aging theory, and sexuality theory. And what this author, Jane Gallup, basically puts forward is this idea that we have erection difference, right? That we have different types of erections when we're older. And so be mindful about that and be thoughtful that there are sex toys that can be helpful. There are other positions that can be helpful. So again, there are ways to remedy that. And then this last area that can be extremely humiliating of incontinence. And again, there are ways that we can remedy that. But I want to make sure that I said as a proviso to all this that there are basically 4 parts of the sort of body mechanics that I think about for medical or physiologic change. One is hormonal change. The second is nerve function. The third is pelvic floor function, like the 16 muscles that basically straddle below the pelvis. And the last one that I think is probably the one that people get mixed up about the most is blood flow. And blood flow is part of the reason why erections have a difficult time occurring. So just be mindful that those 4 areas can be looked at by a good maybe pelvic floor physical therapist or urologist or endocrinologist. There's so many people out there who can be helpful. But, and here's a big but, most of the medical professionals that we deal with have almost no training in sexual medicine and even less training in sexual medicine around older adults' bodies. And so often people will go to their medical professional and say, I've got this itching and burning. And the medical professional, because it's an older adult, won't look at sexually transmitted infections, which are, by the way, on the rise amongst over 50 age groups in certain parts of the country. They won't even think about a sexually involved interpretation of that symptom because they think that older adults aren't having sex. And, a woman came up to me once after a program and said to me, my doctor told me that after menopause, I should just, give it up. And I said, no, wait, slow down. Don't give anything up. There is no expiration date on sex. But aside from the medical or the biomechanical issues, there's this whole raft of psychological and social, or what I call psychosocial issues. And look at all these. Body image, huge issue for people of all ages, but particularly people who have a body that doesn't look like what the billboards are looking like, or have sags and creases and bags and wrinkles and blotches, and it just doesn't look like that myth of uh, the perfect body that is equivalent to the younger body. And as I said earlier, there's increasing STI rates. There's also HIV status, which is so fascinating. For decades, men in the gay community who were positive, who tested positive for HIV, would either refrain from having sex or would only have safer sex with a long-term partner. But a gay man who was single often had trouble finding a way to have a date with another partner because they were HIV positive. And yet the CDC, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, has recently come out with a new proviso, which is that if your HIV viral load is undetectable, then your HIV transmission ability is untransmissible. What does that mean? It means that they can have sex again with more partners. Well, that doesn't always translate because people aren't as up to date on the CDC issues around HIV. And of course, right now during a pandemic, nobody's thinking about anything but coronavirus. And this idea of the third one around loss of or search for another partner after you've lost your partner, there's grief and there's loss and there's trauma. This idea of alternative sexual identification or trauma from either interpersonal violence, as we talked about before, or inappropriate sexual behaviors that can really be difficult to deal with. Social isolation, which we all know way too much about through the coronavirus, family concerns. What, grandma's interested in a new guy? Wait a minute, grandpa's not been dead 2 years. What is going on? That kind of thing. Discrimination based on gender and orientation. And then this whole idea of the intersection of age with race, class, disability, etc. So a whole bunch of stuff on the psychosocial side, even more, I think, than on this medical or biological or biomechanical side. Now, there's an insidious nature of ageism, and do we have time for this? We do. There's one more video I wanted to show you tonight. Put your thumb up if I've given you too many videos, or if you want one more video. One more video? Too many videos. Too many videos or one more video. What do you think? One more video. Okay, sold. All right. Those of you whose cameras are off, you didn't get to vote. I'm sorry, but we're going to have one more very quick video. This is a video about an experiment with a food truck where they put a sign out and they said, no one over 40 can get food out of this truck. I want to talk to you about the insidious nature of ageism, and I think you might enjoy this. Here we go.
Hi. Hi. Just one question really quick. You're not over 40, are you? No. Perfect, great.
Age limit? I'm not under 40, I'm over 40.
We are not serving anybody over 40 today. We're trying to have a little bit younger vibe today. You are exactly what we're looking for. If you're under 40, I'm actually not gonna take your order, sir. Thank you so much for your interest, but we're just trying something different. You're just not exactly what we're looking for.
Every day, age discrimination happens in the workplace behind closed doors. And we wanted to see what it would look like out in the open. So we hid cameras in a food truck and refused to serve anyone over 40.
Are you under 40?
No, this is for my daughter, it's not for me.
Oh, it's for your daughter?
Yeah.
As long as you don't eat them. Okay. Do you promise that you won't eat them?
No, I promise. Yeah.
Okay, okay. Actually, if you could just step away from the food truck since you're not under 40, and I'll bring you the beignets. I don't want people to get the wrong impression if you're standing over here.
Ridiculous.
You guys are under 40, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I can take your order. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I don't know what's happening.
This is a stupid thing that's starting to get really pissed off.
Yeah, I mean, if you have a specific problem with somebody, then just
Yeah,
say that instead of just
screw you.
saying.
Stupid.
Hey, for real. Okay. Walking away, I felt really upset. I almost started crying.
I was updating my resume recently, and I sort of wanted to sound experienced without sounding too old. I was like, oh, I'm experienced, but that's almost not an asset anymore. It's like I have to sound young and relevant.
Older people just don't really fit into our culture.
That's ridiculous.
We actually don't think that this truck is a good fit for you. I'm sorry.
I was outraged. This stunt makes me want to take action to help others who might be discriminated against because of their age.
I love when that older woman who was clearly not white, and they said to her, just don't eat it. If it's for your daughter, okay, give it to her. You promise it's for your daughter? Yeah, I promise. Could you just stand a little further away from the child? It was like, wow. So this is a video about workplaces, but I thought I'd show it today because ARP doesn't do any videos about sexuality and ageism, but it's the same issue that we face, right? It's this really overbearing issue that we have to talk about and that we don't talk about. So yeah, I think there's an analogy to this, to racism, for sure, but there's also, I loved it when those young people said, "The heck with you," and they kind of, they cursed her out, and they, "The heck with you. We're going elsewhere." And I thought, yeah, well, that's what we've got to do. That's how we overturn this. So, um, thank you for those wonderful comments. So, let me just finish up by saying that there's just a little bit more that we can really, I think, look at in terms of major benefits. We know about the awareness and pleasures of touch, the physical release, relaxation, the decreased anxiety that we have about who we are, and our increased body wisdom. Peggy Brick, who was a great sex educator, said that older, wiser, sexually smarter, and she wrote a whole curriculum based on that. And that there are some overall improvements, as Beverly Whipple and her colleagues showed us, in mental health and the quality of life. If you've got any comments about this, I'd love to hear them or write them in the chat. And that's a good example of how I get a little crazy. Sometimes that's Mulva the vulva on my left arm, and that's Richard Johnson, or you could call him Dick for short. He's the penis on my right arm. And I love to use humor because it just relaxes us a little bit when we talk about sex. And I really recommend that you use humor in your own life because sometimes things just don't work the way they used to, and it's okay. Just take it a little slower and have some patience with yourselves. And be knowledgeable, be skillful, and be askable and approachable. If you're involved in a long-term relationship or not, and someone wants to talk to you about some of these issues, be approachable, be askable. And even if you don't know all the answers, say, oh, but I do know somebody who might know. And then send me an email and I'll be happy to give you all the resources you need. It's a balancing act, right? We need to respect older adult sexuality. We need to include sexuality in overall wellness programs. And we need to develop an environment for sexual wellness for all ages. And I have to say that, if I were teaching this class for people in their 20s, I'd be saying some of the same thing about wellness. Remember that it's a human right, that it occurs throughout the lifespan, that aging doesn't necessarily lead to sexual decline, and that there's no normal. I don't use that word anymore. Doors might be opening, but they also might be closing. And a lot of people are squeamish and don't want to talk about sex, but sex occurs even when people have cognitive impairments. There's accumulated loss. But this idea about how cognitive awareness could then lead to ISB or inappropriate sexual behaviors has actually not been borne out in the literature. Of course, it can happen. And as Lisa Diamond and her colleagues said, make no assumptions because people are fluid throughout their lives and they might really begin to enjoy something different as an older adult that they didn't as a younger adult. And maybe, I'm not going to talk too much about organizations, but if you're working in a senior center, you're working in a assisted living or other senior living community, or even in the library, are you prepared to have people talking about these issues around sexuality and aging? And clearly the Chelmsford Public Library is prepared, and right on, Vicki, you're doing great. I want to say that you might not be ready to address other elders in your lives' sexual questions, or maybe your own or your partner's, but are you receptive? Are you ready to think about maybe not conducting training, but maybe going to a training like this, educating other people, and sitting in the discomfort, right? There's always this, the kids use this term all the time, awkward. I have two 20-something kids, and the word awkward comes up all the time, but it is awkward. It's hard to talk about sex at any age, particularly for older adults. So are you willing to sit in the discomfort? And remember, older adults have the right to challenge all of those social norms and to lead full and complex sexual lives. That was, I think, the most important learning that I got from my book and from my doctoral research, that older adults have the most interesting and complex sexual lives. So some tips are just accept your body for where you are, invite in the possibility of emergent joy and pleasure, be ready to communicate, be prepared. I'm an old Girl Scout, and when we were younger, we didn't have to be so prepared. But when you're older, make sure you have your lube, your tissues, your medications, maybe your Bluetooth speaker. If you have a toy, make sure it's charged up. You get what I'm saying? Just be prepared. And I can't say enough about lube, and more lube. And maybe try something new. If your back is hurting and you're used to having one position, try a different position. If you and your partner haven't been sexual in years, have a conversation about what's a fun way that your body is still interested in being excited. And it could be just from sensual touch all the way to sexual touch. Find out. And finally, please, please remember to use humor and patience and loving kindness, because as my colleague and 77-year-old senior sex educator Joan Price says, there's no expiration date on sex. Given all that we're going through right now, everything with the pandemic, and finally we're getting vaccinated here in Massachusetts, and all the stuff that I've taught you tonight in this session, if you could just, and again, this is not for us, this is really for you, in your mind, think of one change you might take to promote sexual wellness in your life. It might be a conversation with someone that you hadn't even thought of before. It might be writing to someone. I don't know, but think about what it might be to promote sexual wellness in your life. So now I just want you to put your arms up and stretch and ask me any questions, share any stories you'd like to share. Please, you cannot read this. I'm so sorry. I'd be happy to provide you with the slides so that you can. These are all the articles and studies that I quoted from tonight. There's also some resources in Spanish. And Vicki, I put those in here for you in case you have any Spanish-speaking patrons of the library who'd be interested. There's some great stuff in here.
Thank you.
One last thought. So when you look ahead and you see fewer years than you've already lived, which is where I am right now, take time in your remaining years to find as much pleasure as you possibly can. And if that includes sex, remember, you deserve it. Thank you so much. It's been really fun. And that's my website, and that's my podcast. And if you want to get in touch with me, just go on my website. You can Google me, and there's a place where you can send me a note. So
Please
thank you.
do send me your slides, and I will forward them to everyone in the group so that they can see them.
Happy
and Jane, that is just a wonderful talk. I so appreciate it, and I so wish it could have been done in person.
Yeah,
To
it would have been
enjoy
really
all
fun.
those things that you can bring when you do an in-person one.
Yeah.
And we have a thank you. I want to ask everyone not to run away. I have a very simple 2-question poll. And I want to thank Jane for joining us. I want to thank all of you for joining us. Take a moment to answer the questions. Also look for our next program in the On the Go with Healthy Senior Living. It's called Nobody's Getting Out of Here Alive, a discussion on death and dying. And that will be on Thursday, April 29th at 7 p.m. Be sure to check our website for all kinds of programs, or pick up a paper calendar next time you're in the library. If anybody has questions for Jane and doesn't want to bring it up this evening, get in contact with me. I'll get in contact with her. We can make that happen for you.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, Vicki.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane, and you have a lovely evening. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you all. I'll hang around for a few minutes if anybody has any more questions. Okay.
Okay, I think we're closing out now.
Yeah.
Thank you very much again.
Thanks for all your help tonight. It's really great to work with you, Vicki. I really
Oh,
appreciate it. And
it's my
maybe we can do
pleasure.
this in person sometime.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you
great.
very much.
All
Good
right,
night.
take care. Good night now.